attempting to kill and cook women, including his then wife.
Cannibal cop Gilberto Valle was found guilty.
Hello everybody and welcome to this very exciting and special episode of PsychOpinion. We are going to be bringing you an interview with a man named Joe Rodriquez. If you're not familiar with who he is the brother of Gilberto Valle, aka the Cannibal Cop. Back in 2012 and 2013, there was an arrest and trial that absolutely stormed the nation with the question, can fantasy be considered a crime? What actions need to be taken for this fantasy to become a crime? And if no actions were taken at all, was there ever really a crime that took place? These are very important questions for all of us because we all have thoughts and ideas. And those thoughts and ideas, if they were to come to light, would those thoughts and ideas be considered a criminal action? With this interview that we will be conducting with Joe, we will be finding out inside information from the man who was on the sidelines and in support of his brother through the entire trial. This is going to be a really good one. Stay tuned.
Gilberto Valle.
Gilberto Valle.
I thought it was a joke. I thought it was my friends playing a joke on me, calling me on my phone. CNN called, asked to speak to a family member. I'm like, yeah, I'm his brother. What's going on? And it's like, oh, well, he's been arrested on a plot to kidnap 100 women and cannibalize them. And I'm just like, okay, no, this is a joke. It was October 25th, 2012 when we got the news. I was on my way out the door, going to Pennsylvania, and I get the news, and I'm like, nah, this is bullshit. But I went online, looked it up, and I saw everywhere. He was everywhere. And I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. Like, what the hell is this? Called my family and told them, you got to get home. We got a problem.
Welcome to PsychOpinion. Now your hosts, Jake, Rod, Steve, Jen, and sometimes Liza.
Gilberto Valle III was born on April 14, 1984. His parents separated when he was young. He was raised in Middle Village, Queens, New York, and attended Archbishop Malloy High School. He attended the University of Maryland, graduating in 2006 with a degree in psychology. Valle joined the New York City Police Department in 2006 and was assigned to the 26th Precinct in Morningside Heights, Manhattan.
So, Joe, what was the family dynamic like growing up with Gil?
It was me and my mother, my stepfather, and Gil and my youngest brother, Dan. They were still very young at the time. You know, their father was highly involved with them in a lot of sports, trying to get them in Little League, trying to, be as active in their lives as possible, but also, maintaining that they had a good education and such. I mean, it wasn't a bad upbringing. As far as you hear about families in turmoil, about child abuse or some psychological, mental abuse and things like that. I mean, it really wasn't like that at that household with the kids there.
So there was never any physical or verbal abuse that you or your brother, to your knowledge, had to go through?
Well, I can't really speak for my brothers in their case. I mean, my relationship with their father wasn't the best. Both of us on both sides probably could have done a little better, but as far as him or his children, I mean, there was nothing like that I saw.
What were some of Gil's favorite horror movies?
To be honest, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I never pictured him to be in a horror genre type of thing. I mean, he was always a sports kid, but what got him into this whole dark world of, DFN network, I mean, happened when he was younger. The movie The Mask actually played a part in that one scene where I think it's Cameron Diaz, she's tied up, and that kind of sparked his interest into bondage and stuff, So I really don't know what kind of movies he was into, honestly. Can't really answer that.
So you don't think that any of these movies inspired him to do what he did, other than The Mask? Mm-hmm. Like there wasn't any other ones that you know of?
Not that I know of. I mean, if he did see something else that kind of sparked his interest to get further into the DFN, the Dark Fetish Network, I I mean, he was very private. It's not something like you could just bring out to somebody. They'd be like, oh, hey, I saw this movie and I really, really like to cannibalize somebody. It was never like that at all. Unfortunately, me and Gil, we grew up a little bit when we were childhood, when we were children, and then I split off.
What were the relationships like for Gil growing up with members of the opposite sex?
Well, as far as females in the family, I mean, he had a pretty decent relationship with. As far as females on the outside, friends, schoolmates and such, I mean, Gil was quite a popular kid, honestly. A lot of people liked him. He had a big following, and when he was young in Catholic school, he had a big following in college, like a circle of 40 to 50 people that all knew each other, and all common friends that visited each other throughout the years, and still keep in contact.
Was there ever any instance or situation that might have secretly alluded to Gil's I guess I would say, dark sexual fantasies that came out into the open later on?
Mm-hmm. Nothing at all. I mean, he was just a normal kid. He liked to do his little league that his father got into. I mean, he was very athletic. There was no indication whatsoever that he was into like the dark macabre world that's out there. No indication at all.
I know you already kind of mentioned this, but did he ever talk to you about any fetish type stuff? Did he talk to you about the mask in that scene? Did you guys ever have like any type of dialogue about fetishes?
Nothing at all. I mean, our conversations a lot of the time were, whether it's about some video gaming stuff or we're kind of poking fun at somebody in the family or a family friend or something like that, nothing. We really didn't get into a lot of, have you watched this show or have you checked out this movie and things like that, and he never really came forward with any topic like that. I mean, he used to hear me writing music a lot. Maybe that could have maybe sparked an interest somewhere along the line. I was playing in death metal bands, so I was always writing music, messing around on a microphone with voice changers and stuff, and it's hard to say. I mean, I'm not saying that maybe I had a part to do in how he got into this dark fetish stuff. There's so much out there, so I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's close to him that would maybe put an idea in his head or introduce him to it. I mean, the internet, it's just tons of garbage out there. I mean, anybody could get hooked on anything.
He met a woman on a dating website, OkCupid, and married her in Spokane, Washington in 2010. They had a daughter in early 2012. After Valle's daughter was born, he became active on Dark Fetish Net, or DFN, a forum dedicated to sexual fetishes and fantasies involving torture, rape, murder, and cannibalism. He chatted with 24 other users about kidnapping, raping, torturing, killing, and cannibalizing more than 100 women, including his wife. In 21 of the 24 conversations, Valle made clear that he was saying was purely fantasy, writing in one email conversation, "No matter what I say, it's make-believe. I just have a world in my mind." Valle's attitude in the other 3 conversations ranged from ambiguity about his intentions to claiming that he was sincere. Valle's wife discovered his Dark Fetish Net posts and reported him to the police on October 25, 2012. Valle was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping. He was fired from the NYPD following his arrest.
Tell us your initial reaction to hearing what your brother had allegedly been up to.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was my friends playing a joke on me, calling me on my phone. Strange enough, my phone number used to be his phone number, and he had gotten a different phone and gave me his line. And CNN called, asked to speak to a family member. I'm like, yeah, I'm his brother. What's going on? And it's like, oh, well, he's been arrested on a plot to kidnap 100 women and cannibalize them. And I'm just like, okay, no, this is a joke. My friends were the practical joker type of crowd back then, and they knew I was going out of town. It was October 25th, 2012 when we got the news. I was on my way out the door, going to Pennsylvania, and I get the news, and I'm like, nah, this is bullshit. I cursed out whoever was on the phone, so you're probably never going to find any footage of me out there because I was not a very friendly person when reporters would come up to me like paparazzi and such, trying to ask questions. But I went online, looked it up, and I saw everywhere. He was everywhere. And I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. Like, what the hell is this? Called my family and told them, you got to get home. We got a problem. And then that's when we got in contact by the city to go to court.
How was Gil's relationship with his wife? Did he have any marital issues that you know of? Did she have maybe a motive to want to get him in trouble?
At first, there was no indication. You know, we found out towards the end that they were having issues, and he never brought it forth over to us. You know, never spoke to me, never spoke to our mother about it. You know, we all found out after the fact, after he was arrested, that there was issues between them. You know, so he kept that part of his life really private.
Gil had stated in an interview at one point that he was intending on wrapping things up when it started to become a problem with his family life or his work life, which seems very strange that were to happen in the same day, although he stated that was the day that he was going to pretty much stop and quit. What's your take on that?
As I mentioned before, he was very private about his job and things that were going on at home with his wife. You know, I remember he had just finished his sergeant's exam. He would have been one of the youngest sergeants in New York City at the time. You know, so that probably weighed heavily on him, having to go through the stress of taking that test. You know, as far as, you know, the wife putting software in his computer, I mean, she had her suspicions. He was cheating. You know, he was very involved with his kids, with his child, you know, and very involved with taking his dog out to the dog park when he wasn't at work, and did what he could do at home to help his wife. I mean, whether she thought he was cheating, maybe it could have been the late night liaisons on the computer that made her call to believe that. You know, I think that's any spouse would probably believe that. Like, oh, you're on your computer all the time. I don't hear video games. What are you doing? I hear a lot of typing. What are you doing? You know, the questions are bound to be asked. But he never talked about any of that with us. You know, we had no indication until after the arrest that there was problems going on at home.
Do you think it was wrong of her to turn in his computer to the FBI?
Well, logically speaking, I think anybody would have. You know, I don't blame her for what she did. You know, maybe if she would have talked to him about it first, try to get his side of the story and why he's doing these things and such. Originally, she thought that he was cheating on her, that he spent a lot of time online. He worked overnight shifts as a cop, so on his days off, he would be heavily involved on the internet. And, you know, their sleep schedules were totally different. While she's sleeping with the baby, he's up on the computer and such. You know, and she installed software to see what he was doing because she thought that he was cheating. And, you know, her turning it over to the FBI, I mean, I think anybody would have done it at that point, you know, without knowing the full story on why he's doing this and, you know, what the cause is. You know, if it's something within their marriage that sparked him to do it, or something that he saw at work, or maybe a certain arrest. He never really talked about his job either. You know, he would talk about the funny arrest, but not the serious, holy shit, this is going to make the news type of arrest. You know, it wasn't never like that. I mean, he kept to himself a lot of the time.
How was their relationship, to your knowledge, him and his wife, up to that point, and then obviously after the fact because of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, Bill's very private about his life. The marriage, we had no indication that there was any sort of issues going on there. You know, he worked, he came home, he played with his baby girl, helped take care of her, and then, you know, worked the night shift and over in Harlem. You know, there was no indication of anything like that, you know. And I can understand people's thoughts on that, like, hey, you know, he was thinking all this stuff about his wife. How could you think about that about your wife? I mean, everybody has some sort of dark side. I mean, it may not be, you know, super crazy or super light, whatever you want to think of it, you know. I mean, it's very hard to say. Everybody has a dark side, and whether they act on it, it's up to them. But, you know, I don't believe that he had any intention of hurting his wife, and even you know, there was arguments that he might even hurt the child, and that was not the case, you know, not at all. you know, to that end, I mean, a lot of the charges against him, I mean, even like one of the chats was talking about, oh, I have an oven big enough to stuff somebody in. The oven in his apartment was probably no bigger than your dishwasher at home. It was tiny. A child could barely fit in there, let alone an adult. You know, he kept his life private. You know, we didn't see any indications towards the end because we noticed that the wife is kind of like pulling away from our side of the family. We didn't really see her a lot. We didn't really see the baby a lot. You know, his baby daughter. You know, and we had no idea that, you know, she had already left. It was about a month later that we found out that she had left, and that was right around the time of his arrest.
United States versus Valle was a criminal case in the Southern District of New York concerning Gilberto Valle, a New York City Police Department officer who had discussed on online fetish chat rooms his fantasies about kidnapping, torturing, raping, killing, and cannibalizing various women he knew, and had used a police database to find the addresses of some. Dubbed the Cannibal Cop by the media, Valle was convicted by a jury of conspiracy to commit kidnapping and for the use of the police database for violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, otherwise known as the CFAA. Valle faced a maximum of life in prison for the conspiracy charge and a maximum of 5 years for accessing the Federal National Crime Information Center database without authorization. Valle's wife testified against him during the trial. Throughout the trial, Valle claimed that the chat room communications were mere fantasy and that he had no intention of acting on them. He was found guilty of both charges in March 2013. The case drew widespread attention for its unusual nature and for the question it posed of at what point exploration of dark fetishes become criminal conspiracy. Valle spent 21 months in prison between his arrest and the conclusion of his trial, 7 of them in solitary confinement. The presiding judge, however, acquitted Valle on the conspiracy charges notwithstanding the verdict, ruling that the prosecution had not proven that Valle's online communications went beyond fantasy roleplay. On appeal, the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit upheld the judge's judgment of acquittal and further ruled Valle's misuse of the police database did not constitute a violation of the CFAA, thus acquitting him of the lesser charge. Judge Paul G. Gardaffi of Federal District Court overturned Valle's conviction on the conspiracy charge in June of 2014, saying the evidence supported his contention that he was engaged in only fantasy roleplay. Valle had at this point served 21 months in prison. The lesser conviction regarding the database remained standing, but Valle was sentenced to time served and release, and he was released. The government appealed the dismissal of the conspiracy charge to the Second Circuit. The United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit ruled on December 3, 2015, regarding the 2 questions on appeal. The government appeals of the District Court's judgment of acquittal on the conspiracy count, and Valle separately appeals from the judgment of conviction on the CFAA count. Because we agree that there was insufficient evidence as to the existence of a genuine agreement to kidnap and of Valle's specific intent to commit a kidnapping, we affirm the District Court's judgment of acquittal on the conspiracy count. Because we find that the District Court's construction of the CFAA violates the rule of lenity, we reverse the judgment of conviction on the CFAA count.
What hardships did you face personally during your brother's trial and incarceration?
Well, back then, like I mentioned, I wasn't the friendliest of people, so I mean, my anger and hostility was more apparent. I just tried to stay away from these reporters, and they would come around our house kind of skulking out in the shadows and popping out from when you least expect them, you know. So, I mean, it was a little hard dealing with the press like that, you know, and they just very intrusive people. I mean, I remember one guy actually came into our backyard. It was kind of like trying to poke around, and I was in the kitchen. And at the time, it was a driveway between 2 houses, and there was no gate. My neighbor would leave his door open for his dog, and I called the dog. The dog came out, stared him down. The guy got panicked. I told him, you got to get out of here because the dog might be hungry. And, well, he left, and never really seen him kind of skulk around the back, but I seen him around the neighborhood, always trying to take pictures from afar and stuff. So that was a bit annoying, you know, trying to go to work at 7 in the morning and have somebody follow me halfway to the train station. Or when I'm getting home, about to open the door to my home, and somebody's kind of running up. And they would do the same thing with my mother, so it was a bit annoying for a while. You know, when the case broke out at first, they would be out there for weeks trying to get as much information from us, but we never really talked with them. There was only maybe 2 or 3 people that we've talked to. It was Amy Dash from CBS. She was with us 100% all the way. And Daniel Ember from Slate Magazine. I'm not sure if he still writes for them, but I contacted him and talked to him about the case. And he was all pro-Gil. I mean, he was like, you know, nothing here adds up. There's like, the supposed conspiracy charge that no crime is being done. No, there's, you know, the intended victims are still safe and sound and such. You know, so it was a bit hard in the beginning. I wasn't so mentally strong. I wasn't so sound in my reasonings and stuff. And we did everything we could to alert the people of the injustices that was going on. I mean, here you have a cop in this big case, and the media just loves to get all over the cops no matter what. You know, cop farts in public, they want to get on their case. You know, and, you know, she stood there stone-faced throughout the whole trial because she knew that sooner or later the justice system would work in our favor because there was no crime committed.
After the appeals and the subsequent dropping of charges, what was your take on the initial validity of this case from the get-go?
I mean, a lot of the evidence that was brought forth by the prosecution, as I said, they try to take a little innocent act and turn it into an overt act, which is a part of what a conspiracy charge is. You know, you have to have a meeting of the minds, which he did correspond with people. They considered that as part of the conspiracy charge. Although no phone numbers or real information was ever exchanged, there was correspondence through the Dark Fetish Network, the DFN website. And, you know, when the charges were dropped, I mean, he did have to go through the second appeals court to get the second charge dropped. And conspiracy charge was dropped because there was not total lack of evidence. There was no overt act. I'll give you an example, okay? So they said that he intended to stalk one intended victim, that he was talking with a gentleman who went by the name of Moody Blues in England, okay? I'm not going to say his name, but his online name was Moody Blues, and he was also known as the Canterbury Cannibal. He lived in England. His chats with my brother were so graphic that the police actually thought he had bodies on his property. So they dug up his property. They looked and they found nothing. But they found enough on his computer to put him away for other illegal activity. You know, I'm not going to get much into what his crimes were, but you can pretty much use your imagination to figure that out. But Moody Blues is actually currently living here in Nebraska in the U.S., and he is actually on the sex offender registry as well for his crimes in England. Okay, the plan was that he was supposed to send somebody over there around the same date that he was supposed to send somebody else from Columbus, Ohio, to Pakistan to a guy named Ali Khan. I mean, total alias right there. I mean, they never found out who he was. And then there was Michael Van Heist from New Jersey, who, you know, my brother was corresponding with. And although they've talked about exchanging for a price, they've haggled pricing and such, and there's a lot of fictitious material in there that was related to a lot of the other chats that were deemed as fantasy chats by the FBI. 27 chats, and 3 of them were deemed as a real conspiracy. Has the same elements as all the other chats as well. The only thing that wasn't really much of a disclaimer, and what they believe this to be a real conspiracy is because they considered an exchange of information as far as being photo, media, things like that. Oh, this is the girl, and, you know, we'll do this to her, and we'll bring her to my house in the mountains, and my white van. You know, the FBI spent weeks looking for a white van and a house in the mountains that did not exist. And that's even here in the judge's acquittal form, if I find it on one of these pages over here. But I got so much marked over here that it's just not allowed to go over here. The fact that no kidnappings took place, no real-world concrete steps committing kidnap were ever undertaken. Some of the things that the judge says over here. Like, even the judge seeing that, you know, this kind of conspiracy charge is not going to go through. You had 3 different kidnappings around the same date. You cannot be in Columbus, Ohio, to send somebody off to somewhere. Also be in Pennsylvania in your house with your white van in your basement, and then send somebody else to India all around the same day. It's just impossible. Okay. Another thing about the case is that they try to introduce evidence, GPS, cell phone data. They try to introduce that, and the judge wasn't going to allow it. The person testifying was an FBI agent. The judge didn't believe his credentials to be an expert on cell phone data. So that was thrown out of court. Okay, and they were saying that the GPS pinged him within 100 feet of his intended victim. The GPS also pinged him on towers thousands of miles away. It doesn't mean he's very close to it. Okay, they try to take a simple act as him handing a PBA card to his wife's friend as an overt act to stalk her. This woman was one of the intended victims in one of the fantasy chats. Okay, another day, I think it was the same friend. He saw her. She worked near a school in the city, and my brother was coming from a anti-terrorism training exercise, and it was him and his partner. He saw his wife's friend, asked his partner if he could stop by, say hello. Simple gesture. The prosecution tried to play that as an overt act. They also tried to play the fact that he went to Maryland to supposedly stalk another victim when he was with his wife and a kid, and that supposed victim had other friends involved. Like I mentioned before, he had a big circle of friends in college. It was real popular there. Things like that, the media never corrected. They never said, hey, you know what? This was debunked in court. This is not the story. This is not what happened. That list of supposed 100 women that was one of the charges, it was half of a wedding list of all the women on one list and all the guys on another, and they just took that list and figured, oh, that must be the list. This is an overt act. So everything that they try to play wasn't enough evidence to say, okay, here he is, he's going to Maryland to stalk somebody, but meanwhile in the trunk of his car is nothing. No equipment, no ropes, no tape, no tarps, nothing to indicate that he was going to try to kidnap somebody, dispose of a body, anything like that. So after the trial, the newspapers, they kept on there poking their fun with all sorts of headlines and such. Some of it's actually really kind of funny if you look at it these days here. This is like tabloid stuff. This is what the media was doing to our family. We had no privacy as far as anything, and nothing would be done to correct that record. And we went out to the city multiple times. We handed out flyers in parks and people, even other police officers, and like, hey, look, this is what's really going on. We had a website set up called fantasyisnotacrime.net. It was up for quite a while with the judge's acquittal, Park Deeds declaration. Park Deeds, a psychiatrist, analyzed my brother and found him to be totally sane. Yeah, from day one of the trial, even the early deliberations before the trial even start, courtrooms were packed, lots of reporters, a few familiar faces that I talked to, Dan Ember from Slate Magazine, Amy Dash from CBS that was there. It was a lot of the chats being displayed on the monitor, trying to portray Gil as a psychopath. He was ready to strike at any moment, they were claiming. Although some of these conspiracy plans went on for months or even up to a year, even 2 years in certain cases, certain texts, nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happened at all. And the prosecution played on the fear. They played on the fear. They played that type of fear tactics with everybody. It was like, what if, he was ready to strike, and what if you let him go and this happens? Again, as I mentioned, the analogies were hijacking a plane or poisoning people in a restaurant. And what would you do? What if? It was a lot of what if, which even Park Dietz even states that, he believes that the jury has been misled. Okay, right. And Park Dietz has interviewed a lot of real psychopaths out there. And this is what he had to say about my brother's case over here. Government's arguments also describe Mr. Valle in a manner that contradicts my psychiatric assessment of his mental condition, character, and level of dangerousness. My assessment revealed no evidence that the defendant has ever suffered from a psychotic or other mental illness, and that the defendant was free from psychopathy, antisocial personality, or any other personality disorder associated with violence. So, I mean, this is not somebody who...
This is somebody who deals with these...
He deals with psychopaths, and Jeffrey Dahmer, Hinckley, Andrea Yates. He deals with this type of stuff, and he's probably heard the worst of the worst. And he had nothing really bad to say about my brother. I mean, this declaration did go into a lot of the paraphernalia that he claims that's my brother's condition. And over here it says, here, my concerns that the jury have been misled. As someone who frequently works with law enforcement, fully appreciate the FBI's decision to investigate Mr. Valle and his co-conspirators. Taking at face value that online correspondence raises the possibility, particularly those without expertise in paraphilic behavior, that these people were serious about acting out their seditious thoughts and committing real crimes. And it wasn't the case. It was all just a bunch of BS fantasy talk online. Some things that they probably would have forget they even talked about a few months from now if they were still continuing this type of chat behavior.
Right.
Something else I also wanted to point out over here from Park Dietz. The absence of any follow-up or complaint when plans, quote-unquote plans, went unfulfilled or conversations were interrupted. The absence of any of the gear or facilities needed to carry out such a plan, and the absence of any meeting or identification of his collaborators is more compelling evidence that these were not plans at all of the arguments to the contrary.
Now he was never put on the stand, though, correct?
He wasn't.
And what was the defense's reason for that?
They thought that the jury would be focused more on the paraphilia aspect of this declaration, other than the fact that the government had no real evidence. So they didn't want that to overshadow the fact that the government had no real evidence. That what they're claiming was overt actions was really just innocent gestures, and they tried to play it out as something. They tried to play it out to be something much bigger than what it really was.
Roughly how long did this take place?
Time frame wise, 2-3 months maybe. I mean, I know towards the end of the trial I wasn't able to attend because I had back issues. My back went out and I wasn't able to walk for a while. But my mother went and we just came home and relayed what was going on. And she even sat in on the Van Heist trial for a couple of sessions. FBI recognized her and they tried to intimidate her. They were like, come with us, come into this room. My mother's like, no, I'm free to be here and I'm going to do what I want.
Gotcha.
So she attended the rest of the trial. And, same thing with Van Heist. They put a lot of overt acts that they claimed was going towards a real plan. And Van Heist doomed himself by meeting with Christopher Ashe. If that never happened, this case probably would have been thrown out.
Now, as far as your brother's case is concerned, he was found guilty, correct, by the jury?
He was convicted by the jury. The judge, on the 2 charges, the judge overturned the conspiracy because there wasn't lack of evidence. But he withheld the second charge of the illegal access to the database. The second appeals court, which consisted of 3 judges, found in his favor and exonerated him from that. So, I mean, he's got a totally clean record.
Okay.
Totally clean record. There's nothing in his background that's, unless somebody knows about the case or does any digging, they're not really going to know who he is in this day and age. I mean, a lot of kids, they're not going to, a lot of people, a lot of kids, young or old, or people, they're just not going to research something like this unless they have an interest in it.
Right. I mean, it's hard to know what the jury as a whole was thinking during the process, but do you think if you take a trial like OJ's, for example, and how long it lasted and how long it was drawn out, that these jurors, I don't know if these people were sworn to secrecy and kept close by or couldn't go home, talk to people, but do you think that possibly any of the longevity of the trial forced them into making a decision one way or the other? Do you think that had anything to do with it?
I don't remember the deliberations taking a very long time, maybe 3 or 4 days, but that might not be accurate. But they came to a decision pretty quickly, and unfortunately it was not the verdict we were hoping for. But my brother stayed strong. My mother stayed the strongest out of all of us, and we just had to wait for the lawyers to do their thing and get it to the appeal. Now, when Judge Paul Gardefee exonerated my brother of the conspiracy charges, the prosecution still had a chance to bring it back to trial, and their attempt failed.
Okay.
They went to a higher court, their attempt failed, so that was it. That conspiracy charge is done. And it was just maybe a couple of months or so later that the second charge was just dropped off entirely.
Okay. And for the most part, to your knowledge, there's never been anything since, right? That's been brought up or come back around, or, I mean,
not at all. I mean, he may get an email from a fan or groupie or something like that, you know, but not. I mean, don't really see much about the case much nowadays. I mean, maybe a little clip on YouTube now and then, or a Facebook reel or something like that, but very rarely. I mean, a lot of people outside of New York don't really know about this case. They probably know more about the German cannibal cop, a cop in Germany who actually cannibalized somebody piece by piece. Now, well, the guy was still alive from what I remember reading. You know, they called him, I can't even pronounce his name. It's one of those weird European German names.
Gotcha.
But he, you know, after he was exonerated, Gil just, you know, kind of laid low for a while. You know, try to get his life back together. Try to get some visitations for his daughters, which ultimately failed. And hopefully one day, you know, when she's old enough to make her own decisions, she'll reach out, and we would definitely like to hear from her.
Gotcha. I remember hearing something that I thought was interesting on the judge and exonerating your brother, was that he would prefer to have a guilty man, 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person go to jail for something like this that would in fact have been more than likely a stay of execution, a lifetime in jail. So that's not quite the mindset you always would think that certain judges or politicians might have. But I thought that was pretty interesting, and I didn't know if, because once again, when we come back to all of this is all where does the thought crime end and where does the actionable what took place that actually would have tipped the scales. And so in essence, the jury found him guilty without any true actionable proof, right? I mean,
for the conspiracy charge, an overt act would have to have taken place. Okay, now what they try to play it as the overt acts was just simple gestures, visiting a friend, with bringing your wife and daughter to see your friends in Maryland, not just one, a whole group of people. You know, giving a friend a PBA card. I mean, PBA card in New York, that's like the kiss the police's ass type of card. You know, I have a PBA card, and the police tend to, you know, be a little lenient with people like that.
Now, when he did go to Maryland to see his ex-schoolmate, there were talks that that was more of kind of a reconnaissance mission, and by bringing his wife and child along were kind of an insulator to make him be able to move in public with them, kind of making it a little bit easier for him to do that. When he did get back from that trip, a long weekend, I had seen, and I don't know if this is the truth or not, but I had seen where they had stated that he went directly to the computer to communicate I guess the actions that took place during that time with this guy, Moody Blues. So, which seems to me, as just an average person, kind of odd that after a long weekend you wouldn't go grab some food or unpack or go to bed, but go directly to your computer to talk about it. And I think a lot of people that have looked into this investigation kind of see that as kind of one of those up in the air points, so where they're not 100% sure what to believe in that. What would you say about that and people that would think that?
Well, I could see why they would think that. I mean, any logical person would probably put two and two together and come up with the hypothesis that, yeah, he's really going to try to commit this crime. I think it was more of a sort of like fulfilling an addiction type of thing. Like, you know, me, I love my video games. I go home, I want to plug in. I want to plug in and get in there as soon as I can. And maybe he wasn't really much of a video gamer. And, you know, whatever problems he was having at home, he found a way to cope with it. And it may not have been the most appropriate way, but he found some way to cope with it. And maybe this was his sort of addiction to this online world of, you know, being somebody that he isn't, and shrouded in mystery type of thing. You know, I would pin it down to some sort of addiction, like, oh, I saw her today, and then, you know, his imagination starts going wild on the type of fantasy chats that he was engaged with Moody Blues about this one particular target. I mean, she was never in danger. like I said, a big circle of friends. He saw her and a whole bunch of other people that they all knew each other. So, I mean, to say it was a recon mission, I can kind of understand some people saying that, but overall, what kind of recon are you going to get when she's surrounded by people that you know, and her attention is not going to be all on one person. It's going to be divided amongst a lot of other people. So to say it's a recon mission and try to use that as an overt act, the government, I just see they failed. They failed to prove that it was an overt act to commit a crime. And as far as the communications with Moody Blues, you know, again, time goes on, and it was set for a date to send her off. Date goes by, there's no correspondence, nothing saying, hey, what happened? You backed out, what's going on? Nothing like that. They just moved on to the next fantasy, whether it was involving the same person or somebody else different. Now, as far as 24 other people, I don't know of. As far as my brother's concerned, it was just Michael Van Heist, Moody Blues from England, and Ali Khan from Pakistan. Now, there was others involved that weren't directly tied to my brother, and the media never corrected that record either. You got Michael Van Heist here, who corresponded with my brother. He also corresponded with this gentleman over here, Christopher Ashe, who, in my opinion, was ready to go at it. He was ready to take the plunge into that world. Michael Van Heist also corresponded with this man, Richard Meltz. Pled guilty, got automatic 10 years, not even a trial. Okay? These men had nothing to do with my brother, not Christopher Ashe, not Robert Meltz, but he was included in the whole Cannibal cop ring along with my brother because of Michael Van Heist. Now, Michael Van Heist got railroaded too. He actually went to the Hamilton police in Jersey to tell him about this guy, and they didn't believe him. They didn't believe him, and for some reason, Michael just kept on this fantasy with him. What happened with him, what did him in the court, is that he actually met with this gentleman. They met, so that's a meeting of the minds right there, and they actually met face to face. So that's what really put him in jail. You know, and it's quite sad because, you know, the FBI used them too. They said, okay, yeah, point out the ones you think are really going to do it, and we'll arrest them. And they arrested him too. You know, and the thing with Van Heist, with my brother, I mean, you can see it's the same thing. Dates going past, and nothing's ever done or said, and nobody's like bitching about, oh, you backed out of this deal. What are we going to do? Nothing like that. Now, Ash had an arsenal of stuff ready for kidnapping. Supplies, ropes, something that looks like barbecue skewers, a whole bunch of other stuff that I wouldn't even know what a kidnapping would do with this stuff. But this is what the FBI presented as evidence, because I had FBI agents on Christopher Ashe and Robert Meltz after Van Heist was tied to these guys. And they only found out about that through my brother. So if any good thing came out of my brother's case, is the fact that at least one person who had the intent to do something crazy was found out and put away.
There was a discussion that was had that stated that a lot of times, whether they be psychopaths or sociopaths or whatever they may end up being, seek out a career field in either law enforcement or something that gives them the ability to be able to kind of both blend in first and foremost, but also be able to utilize certain things like a database, for example, to their benefit. If that in fact is not the case, of course, in this instance, do you know of, or has your brother ever spoken to what got him into law enforcement to begin with?
That was a question we still trying to answer to this day. You know, he went to the University of Maryland and majored in psychology. Mm-hmm. And then when he told us he was going to be a cop, you know, at first I was like all gung-ho. I'm like, yeah, bring law and order to the streets and everything, you know. But then thinking about it, I'm like, you know, he's going to put himself at risk for a city full of a whole lot of people who, one, won't appreciate anything that he does. And the moment one bad thing happens, they're going to try to crucify him. And that's exactly what happened here. You know, if he wasn't a cop, this case probably wouldn't have never made the light of day in any courtroom. You know, but the way they made the charges sound at first, and the first night in court with Magistrate Pittman, I believe his name was, he sat there and said this is the most awful thing he's ever heard brought forth into his courtroom. So, of course, he denied bail. Then the second judge, I don't remember his name, it looked like he was leaning towards Gil's side, but some of the alleged intended victims, and so they sent lawyers over there to plead their case and believe that they were in danger. So they kept them. And by the time visitation rights came around, it was like maybe 7 to 8 months into his time in the Manhattan facility. They didn't let us talk to him much. They didn't let us see him much at all. His second court appearance, he looked totally like a different guy. I mean, his hair grew out, full beard. It's like I didn't recognize my brother. And they did the same thing to Van Heist. They kept him away from his family. They didn't let him get anything, and he looked like a disheveled wolfman when he was in the court, appearing by the judge. And I think the prosecution did that on purpose. I was like, make them look disheveled, make them look crazy. And then we'll say, oh, he did this and he did that and he was going to do this. All these charges that were just BS. GPS location that was unreliable, testimony from a special agent FBI who had no credentials in even talking about cell phone data. Okay, the alleged stalking that wasn't really stalking at all. What else? Was there? The list of 100 women, which was basically a list for wedding invitations. Then they just wanted to tie something to something else and call it an overt act. But no supplies, no ropes, no tarps, no tools, no weapons, nothing in his trunk to indicate he's ready to kidnap somebody and chop them up and eat them or whatever.
Now let me ask you this: if because he had put together what the prosecution considered a blueprint, if you will, for what he would need to be able to kidnap. He also made a notation in one of his communications about how he was aspiring to be a full-time and a skilled kidnapper. Again, I guess it goes to this whole fantasy that he was trying to both manipulate to a degree his own step outside of himself, if you will, and be something in private and away from anything in reality. But having stated those sorts of things and some of the other stuff that had been or had come out in those both emails that he had sent and also the fetish website communications that he had, if he were to have gone to Home Depot for a remodeling thing or something, maybe there was a plumbing issue at the house and he needed to, so he goes and grabs some, a handful of things from Home Depot, electrical tape or duct tape or rags or whatever else. Do you think that based off of the way that you were seeing the case handled and how the prosecution was treating him, that if he were to have picked up duct tape or gotten whatever he needed as part of the chloroform that he was stating that he would make,
they definitely would have used it against him.
And do you think that would have been enough to have put him away? And that's crazy to think about.
If you look at him and let's say he goes to Home Depot, he buys electrical tape and some other stuff for plumbing. What else is he getting there? What else would somebody need to successfully kidnap somebody? The chloroform recipe that he looked up online, that was their way to enhance the fantasy, to have as much detail into it that sounds pretty much real.
Right.
That was their way of enhancing the fantasy. The chats with him started off with just him and somebody else pretending that they had a restaurant called Mookie's Kitchen or something like that. And, they just flowed with it and what they were doing in the restaurant, and then it just eventually flowed into this whole world of cannibalism. And
well, you said he had a psychology degree, right?
Yeah, he had a psychology degree.
Obviously, you're not an idiot to get that sort of degree. He was an intelligent human being, also to become a police officer and pass that sort of stuff. From what I've gathered and what I've seen, so many of the communications that he had seemed so overtly stupid if he was trying to hide something or keep things.
Very, very stupid. He didn't use a VPN to conceal his IP address. The computer that he was using was shared among him and his wife. If anybody was dumb enough to commit a crime like this, they would get caught so easily. He did nothing to try to hide his steps. The only thing, he never announced his true identity online. Who's going to do that?
I'm sure there was a certain stigma that lasted for a period of time while this was all in the middle of happening. If you can recall, how long did anything like that last? I mean, was it once the trial was over and once he was a free man, did it kind of just, was it just buried, or was it still something for a while that was...
The newspapers try to do articles. I mean, he did do a few interviews after his exoneration. He was on TV. He was on some wannabe mock dating show. I think, forgot who it was. I don't think it was MTV. I forgot who the producers were.
Oh yes, I did watch a video about that. And felt more.
He did some interviews, and that was it. He kind of wanted to purposely drop out of the spotlight for a while.
The one weird thing that I noticed about that is that he did seem to be somewhat playful with I guess the verdict at the end of him being a free man and all, but he did go on to some shows, like you stated, that dating show, and I watched it, and it was a parody of itself. It was goofy, and it seemed like he was making a mockery of himself in doing it. And
yeah, he tried to make light of the situation. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, it's so childlike, so juvenile. This is like high school, like junior high school and high school kids doing some stupid pranks to their friends. Like, oh, let's call ourselves Girl Meat Hunter and let's eat his girlfriend. Something like stupid shit like that. And, after a while, the stigma stood. The whole Cannibal Cop thing stood with him for a while. And I'm pretty sure he's still fighting his demons over this, but he's just very private about it. Yeah, and I think he's done a pretty good job of maintaining his life and moving forward as best as he can. I mean, I know it really sucks to have a daughter out there you can't see, and as I said before, hopefully one day when she's old enough to make her own decisions, come find us, come see us.
I know that he had talked about in one of his interviews that I had seen about it was time to start dating again or looking into a relationship.
Yeah.
Do you know if he's had much luck with that, or is he with anybody now, to your knowledge?
No, he's single guy right now. I think he's kind of like, playing the bachelor role a little bit, a little date here and there, meet up with fans or, a girl that might be fascinated with him, but nothing really serious, I don't think he really has time for it, really. He goes home, does his sports betting, takes care of his dog, and then goes to work the next day and just trying to keep out of the spotlight. He does travel to Maine occasionally to talk with his co-writer, Brian Whitney. I'm not sure if they have anything else in the works for the future. He hasn't really touched writing in a while. But the whole Cannibal Cop thing, that stuck with him for quite a few months. I mean, even now to this day, somebody may recognize him, remember him, may not be, they may not say so directly to his face.
Right.
But, he was known. I mean, he's had some difficulty afterwards, having to deal with the whole trauma, being in solitary for months, not knowing what's going on, not knowing if he's ever going to be put in the general population, how he's going to be accepted. And they loved him in there. I tell you, they loved him. I mean, kind of ironic that he ended up to be a cook in their kitchen. And all the news had a field day with that. They just wanted to, poke fun at it. And that's all it became. It became from a matter of, oh my God, these charges are so atrocious, to, oh my God, these charges are too funny. Look at him, he's cooking for people in jail, making jailhouse pizza out of fajitas and whatever else they can find. I remember him saying mackerels was the big currency there. That mackerel fish in those little containers there. So that was like their big currency there. But they really liked them there. The COs, they had never had a problem with them. The other inmates left them alone. They played around with them, teased them around a little bit about the whole charges and everything. But there was nothing malicious. You figure a cop and GP in jail, he's gonna get killed, and a lot of people will probably root for that type of thing. But in his case, everybody knew he just didn't belong there. These charges with such BS. And like, what could the government be doing better with their time than to come after a cop for chatting about munching out on some woman after they kill her, And like I said before, if he wasn't a cop, they would not even have brought these charges to fruition.
Do you think that if Gil wasn't a cop at the time, would he have had a different verdict?
Absolutely. I mean, the media just loves to crap on cops all the time, whether they're innocent or guilty. You know, it's like with Michael Van Heis's situation. He actually went to the Hamilton police to try to warn them about certain people, and they ignored him. So if Gil was not a cop, this probably wouldn't have never made a light of day in any courtroom.
Yeah, I've tried to picture it from both sides of the fence, I guess. From obviously anything that happens within somebody's family, you're going to, if you have any involvement or love for your brother, your sister, whomever is going through something, there's certain levels of involvement or backing that you're going to give them. But from a bystander's perspective, somebody who's not involved, has no involvement, no bias or anything like that, I personally can see, although maybe not all of it was delivered in a fashion that was not meant to, or I should say this, I think based upon what I'm hearing from you, that a lot of it was very direct and straightforward. They showed you what they wanted you to see and kept the stuff that was potentially damning or that negates the actual truth out of the spotlight or out of the newspaper or anything like that. But for me to look at this and say, these are the types of things that he wrote about, the things that he said that he wanted to do, to me it still does seem a little freaky. I mean, and I said this before, we all have skeletons in our closet, and we've all done some silly stuff, especially when we think that nobody's around to see or to hear. But for me, I can understand why it went to court, at least from my perspective, whether he was a cop or not. I also question why, if his wife had given that information to the police prior to Gil actually hearing it. I don't know if she called him directly and said, "I'm getting ready to do this," or confronted him before giving that information to the police as far as the information that was on the computer. But I felt as though that there was a good chance that anybody could have set up like a sting. If they wanted to truly figure out if this was the truth or not, or real, it could have been real quick. No different if it was in like a child pornography type of ring or something like that, where you want to, if somebody's stating that they're going to do something that's egregious and kind of counter to what is the norm, and potentially could be hazardous, dangerous, or in this case, worse than that, potentially killing people, then I question why they didn't do that to begin with. And I wonder if it's because he was a police officer that they might have given him a pass from that standpoint, instead of trying to kind of catch him in the act, if you will.
Well, with him, I mean, after the laptop was turned over to the FBI, they did their investigation and pretty much set it up like, they called him on his phone and said, "Oh, your car got hit." Something about his car getting hit downstairs. And when he came outside, the FBI right outside his door, guns drawn and everything. And, it's really screwed up in a way to think that, they wasted their time over this when nothing happened. Now, you take Christopher Ashe on the other side of the spectrum. He had all this stuff and was ready to go at stuff. And he was actually set up with a sting by the FBI, where an FBI agent played off like they wanted to join his killing ring. And they went around looking at people, and this guy's like pointing out random women, like, "Yeah, her, she deserves to die. This one, that one, we'll do that one too, and this and that." And he was ready to go. But when it came to Gil's case, no equipment, nothing purchased to even facilitate any sort of robbery. I mean, when would he have the time? He's working night times. He goes home in the morning, takes the dog out, plays with the baby, takes care of things at home for the wife, and really no time. I mean, where would he have the time to do this? And he obviously didn't have the facilities. No house in the mountains, no white van, no pulley system in the big basement, no giant oven.
There were discussions where he had stated that he had a oven large enough to put a human body in, that he would roast people over a spit, that he had a pulley system in his basement, which I understand was a shared basement for laundry at the apartment complex that he was at. Let's touch on that briefly.
An apartment complex with at least 6 floors, and a shared basement with a laundry room for all the tenants. And there's a basement that the government was trying to refer to was the house in Pennsylvania with the white van and all this other stuff, which he owned none of. His stove at home was probably no bigger than your dishwasher, and a child could probably barely fit inside of that stove. You know, so I mean, all this fictitious information that the government wasted taxpayer money. They went looking for that white van, looking for that house, and found no other vehicles registered to him. Found no properties registered to him in Pennsylvania. So I mean, it just didn't exist, and they wasted a lot of time looking for it. You know, the basement in his apartment complex is a very busy basement. It's a side entrance, people always coming in, walking their dogs back and forth, people using the laundry room. There's no way you're going to be able to commit a murder and put somebody on a spit roast in a basement like that. It's not, just garbage. You know, his oven, not even half the size of this table, like maybe that big. It was like very, very, very small. And the government just went after him with all the fury of an angry God, you know, and they focused on the disgusting chats. I mean, a lot of the chats were just downright disgusting, no doubt, you know, but the defense argued that that's his expression of free speech. You know, anybody could go on the Dark Fetish Network and start chatting about this, but the moment they meet people in real life and commit some sort of overt act, then yeah, you got your conspiracy. Right. Because right there, let me see, you got some over here for that.
While you're looking at that, so the fact that he was actually using names and images of real people.
That was a big mistake on his part, honestly. You know, if he would have just used some bimbo's picture off of Craigslist and claimed this is the name and this is who we're going to go after, you know, you can't even find out who these women are half the time, you know, and especially now with social media, you know, you got women posting themselves all over with fake names. You know, if he was to use a picture of, like, let's say, a woman in California, you know, and the kidnapping plot is taking place in New York, anyone with common sense would say, why would he travel all the way to California just for one kidnapping, when there's plenty of people here in New York City that they can, you know, go after if they really intended to do this. You know, funny thing about that, in the neighborhood that he was patrolling in Harlem, a lot of people came to the police precinct demanding answers because there was a lot of missing women in the neighborhood, mostly prostitutes, crackhead women, you know, undesirable women, that if they got missing, nobody would miss them, who were just maybe immediate family, and that's about it. And they wanted the police to open an investigation into that, and that nothing ever came out of that. But they, you know, a lot of people were in panic. I'm like, oh my God, we got this guy, the cop who wants to eat people. My daughter's been missing for 6 months in Harlem. Did he have anything to do with this? You know, right. But none of that ever came up into the court at all. Okay, you know, the overt acts that the government claimed, you know, in furtherance to the conspiracy and to the effective legal object thereof, the following overt acts, among others, were committed in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere. July 9, 2012, the defendant, using internet and electronic instant messaging program, communicated with co-conspirator not named in the case, so CC1, they named them, which actually was Michael Van Heist. All right. July 22nd, Valle traveled to Maryland to meet the victim with his family, with a whole bunch of other people. How the hell are you going to stalk somebody doing that? You know, stalking, you know, you hear stalking, you picture somebody in that black hoodie hiding behind a tree 3 blocks away with binoculars. You don't picture somebody face to face with you at a public gathering, in a public place with your family, your infant daughter, introducing them to your friends out there. And he had a big circle of friends. Everybody knew each other. Everybody knew where each other worked. They knew each other's personal lives more than they knew themselves. Okay?
I remember in some movie, and I forget what it is, I'm sure it was a comedy, them stating that it was so overt that it was covert. So that, like, their actions were meant to be in a public space, to be seen, that's the alibi, is that there's nothing could happen because I'm in a public space. I am here, but in reality, it was for a different reason altogether. But we've touched up on that.
They tried to play the recon role, and you know, the judge just saw through it. Is this just a simple visit to Maryland and introducing his family to his friends? You know, they're also saying another one of the last one here. Valle accessed the law enforcement database without authorization.
Let's step back briefly and go to the improper usage of the police database, for example. That's one that's been talked about ad nauseum, and I know you've heard it a ton.
That's a fun one.
Tell me a little bit about your take on that. If even during the communication that you've had with your brother since, if he's ever brought any of that up, or if he's been kind of closed-mouthed about things from that past, or if he's kind of given you any reasoning behind some of the decisions that he made, or what his thought process was in doing the things that he did do.
Yeah, the illegal usage of the database thing, I mean, the defense argued he already had login and password, so where is the illegal use? As far as looking up an intended victim, that was actually by her request. She's a childhood friend that grew up with him, and she asked him to look up a parking ticket, and he did. But it ends up that she was one of the intended victims in one of the fantasy chats, so of course the government wanted to put that as an overt act of him committing a crime against this girl. I mean, I actually met her a long time ago. Can't say I'm a big fan of her, but, you know, overall, my brother grew up with her. There's no way you would ever try to hurt this girl. But saying illegal use of the database, he had passwords, he had a login, and he looked up a parking ticket. That's all it was. I mean, he had all the authorization he needed. He had the login and password to do it. You know, it's not like he stood at home and illegally hacked their database to his house. Then you can say that's an illegal access. Right. When you have a password and login, you don't. That's not illegal access.
I wonder if there's any
inappropriate. Yeah, inappropriate. Yeah, maybe. But
well, most definitely. I mean, it's inappropriate. Yes, 100%. But if it's not illegal to him, if he's able to search whatever he deems necessary, and he's got the keys to the city type of thing, then I can understand that would have been wiped away as not being an overt act.
Yeah, but the government tried to play it as such, and only because the person he looked up was a friend of his that was used in one of the chat fantasies. You know, if this girl was not used at all, that charge would not have even come up. You know, and when it comes to the whole conspiracy charge thing too, I mean, over here it's saying under New York penal law, prosecutor must demonstrate evidence in 3 specific circumstances to prove conspiracy charges. First, 2 or more people must be involved. So because he was chatting with these guys online, they wanted to play that as the first part of the conspiracy. There is no upper limit to the number of people that can be charged in this whole conspiracy. But at the moment, it was just him and Van Heist. And then him and Moody Blues and him and Ali Khan. So these 3 different instances. Okay? Let's see. There must be at least 2. Second, there must be criminal intent. So they're arguing that the criminal intent was there for what they were planning online through these chats. Okay, then they argue the alleged conspirators must have known that they were planning was illegal and intended to do it anyway. Now, in a lot of the chats, you know, Gil was saying, things like, you know, we can't get caught, it'll ruin my life, or things like that, you know. Not even sure why he would type that, but the defense argued, again, is to enhance the fantasy, to give that risk factor. Like, oh shit, if I do this, I'm going to get caught and I'm going to go to jail. But if we do it certain ways, we won't get caught. You know, he had no ideas on even how to dispose of the body other than to eat it. You know, and the jury just found it, the prosecution just made it sound really disgusting to the jury, and the jury.
You can see how somebody could see that both ways.
No, yeah, absolutely. But then the last part of the conspiracy in New York, finally, overt action must be taken. At least one conspirator must have taken some sort of overt action to further the plan. That's what doomed Van Heist when he met with Christopher Ashe. My brother never met with these guys. Did not know their names, did not have their telephone numbers. All their corresponding chats were through the Dark Fetish Network. Alrighty. And then something over here that Park Dietz also states out. This I found really funny. The government argued that Mr. Valle's failure to disclose his real name, occupation, and a photograph of himself point to his guilt. But this is untrue. Yeah, I'm going to murder somebody. I'm going to put my face up there. I'm going to make it the best Facebook picture I have and just show somebody in Dark Fetish Network what I look like and what my intent is. Are they stupid?
Right.
Are they really, really stupid? And let's see. The vast majority of people who frequent sex sites and participate in uncensored sex chats do so under fictitious names as the anonymity provides them greater freedom to indulge their imaginations wildly without fearing such consequences of losing the trust of real partners, losing their jobs, or subjecting themselves to blackmail. So, but the prosecution is trying to say, oh, because he concealed his identity, he's guilty. I mean, you know how many people get catfished online? Fake dating sites or a profile. A guy sees a pretty girl, send him a picture. Hey, let's meet. Let's do this. Send me money. A guy gets totally catfished and realizes that he just got scammed and stuff. But, where's their conspiracy charge? These are people trying to scam people online. And some of them are real successful at doing it. Wouldn't that be considered conspiracy? And like, hey, you know what? Let's send a picture of a hot chick, scam some guy out of all his money. And
I feel as though that there's so much that's been talked about and that went on with the communications that there's enough there to be able to have a view from two different perspectives, to understand the guilty side of it and to understand the non-guilty side of it. So, I mean, and I know based off of the communication I've had with you today that you are 100% on your brother's side, and I commend you for that. I think about like a potential bias, like for you or your mother or somebody who's involved, so close, so involved. But then I think of somebody, a bystander, somebody who's separate of all of it, hasn't dealt with it. We're getting fed what whomever is sending out that information wants us to hear, like the stuff that you've talked about, the things that's juicy. Let's put that out there to try to continue to paint him in a certain light, while let's hold hold the information that would be contradictory to that and maybe quash that idea. So it's interesting how that's done in both the court and in from the standpoint of how it came out, whether it be in papers or in the news. They kind of just feed you what the narrative that they want to feed you. So.
Absolutely. I mean, it's even happening to this day on a political level. You can't back one person without being labeled something, and vice versa. I mean, people are even being persecuted for what they think about what's going on with our country. And that's not even on a criminal court level. And on a criminal court level, if the government could just take you in for just what your thoughts are,
right?
No matter how good or bad they are, I mean, just try to put people away from it. That's without evidence, without proof, without the overt act being taken. That's injustice.
Let me ask you this, because I feel as though, I mean, everybody's heard of Jeffrey Dahmer. Everybody's heard of even the fictitious, the Hannibal Lecters of the world and everything else, whether they be made up or real. This is kind of unprecedented in that they wanted. It's almost like, to me, it felt like the prosecution wanted him to be guilty so bad that they were willing to do whatever they could to do that. I think that's in essence the case with every prosecution in any case. But for other people to have been found out because of what happened with your brother, that's a good thing, because we got those guys off the street. Yeah. I wonder how the fetish apps and the sites and everything, I wonder how that's changed as far as the monitoring is concerned based upon your brother's particular case. I wonder if that's changed the way that the government either over the oversight on that, or if it's just as lax as it's always been, or has it helped in some form or fashion to potentially stop or mitigate the damages from sex trafficking or certain things that are really problematic in our society. I'd be intrigued to know if this was kind of I don't know the right term for it, but kind of the fact that this happened sucks, yes, but was there something good that came out of it?
I mean, the only good I see is that people who were really intent on doing something got caught, and they had evidence on them, real evidence, not just hearsay evidence, or playing it off as a simple little 5-minute talk and visit is an overt act of stalking. I'm not sure if sites like DFN or other sites like this have changed their policies with stuff like this. I mean, The guy who runs the DFN website is a Russian guy that they actually had, through video chat with him in court in his testimony. I wasn't there for that day to see that though, but if I remember correctly, my mother was telling us that they have no regulations on this stuff. This guy is not even running the U.S. and so what kind of jurisdiction could the U.S. have?
Sure.
Unless they purposely tell every internet provider block certain websites, and if somebody knows how to get on the dark web quite well, they can get past whatever the government wants to try to block and somehow see what they want to see. So I don't think there's been any policy changes in these websites. I mean, I don't follow these websites at all.
Sure,
So
I understand.
I wouldn't know. But there's people out there that keep visiting this site, doing their fantasy chat or their role play. They're doing their thing, and very rarely you even hear anything about Dark Fetish Network since this case ended. It got its popularity because of this case, but then after that, you don't really hear a lot of people talking about it. It's not something you bring up at the lunch table or break time. I was like, oh yeah, I was on this website called Dark Fetish Network. You gotta see what they do here, It's not something you're watching on your phone during your break, That's something that people will do in the privacy of their own home, which is, that's their domain. What they do behind closed doors, as long as it stays legal, is their business. Yeah, these chats were crazy. So I looked at some of these things. I'm like, hey, maybe I'll steal that for lyrics for my songs from my death metal band, But it's not illegal. It's not illegal to think crazy things. It's not illegal to have these thoughts of. I mean, they're bad, but they're not legal of hurting people.
Sure.
I mean, I've gone through a lot of days where I think myself, the number one person on my list if a purge ever happened would be this one. But does that mean I'm actually going to do it? The government can't come after me and put me away for just a thought.
Right.
Even if I say something, where's my overt act? I have nothing to kidnap anybody with. I mean, what am I going to do? Pull out a cigarette and threaten them with it? Cancer, secondhand smoke, that's about it I could be taken in for. But it's just ridiculous what the government try to do. And over here, Park Dietz is also saying about my brother, the government argued that Mr. Valle is a quote-unquote sick man, but this is not supported by any evidence. In my psychiatric evaluation, I found no evidence of psychopathology that would justify such a label. I mean, he wouldn't say this about a nice guy. He wouldn't say it like, let me rephrase that. He wouldn't say that about someone who's just downright psychopathic or crazy.
Right. And he has no skin in this game, so to speak.
Exactly.
He's just saying what he's saying.
There is no evidence that Mr. Valle attempted to kidnap and rape Kid, access a suitable vehicle, assessed an isolated or soundproof location. There was no evidence that Mr. Valle committed any abortive attempts to commit an abduction, sexual assault, torture, or homicide. No indications at all. Now, this would have been great for the defense testimony, but the prosecution would have pulled it around and be like, oh, his fetish is dangerous. He has all these images on his computer. Funny thing about that, okay, they try to play it off that he viewed certain videos and images from the Dark Fetish Network, okay? Now, if you go to a website, your internet cache folder is filled with junk that you haven't even viewed, little thumbnails and such. And they try to introduce a thumbnail picture. It was so pixelated, you couldn't even tell what it was. It's not proof that he viewed it. And they try to play it off like, oh, he's watched all these disgusting videos. Yeah, some of it was over the top. Some of it was just downright B-movie rate caliber snuff film, or something you would see like the Cannibal Holocaust, some crazy scene, or people eating or getting sexually assaulted and stuff like that. Let's see. He also says the government relied on several analogies in his rebuttal argument involving a hypothetical conversation about hijacking a plane, hypothetical simulation of a bank robbery, and a hypothetical poisoning obsessed chef. I believe these analogies are misleading, and which is true. They played on the fears of the jury. What if you let him go and he does something? How would you feel? Playing on their feelings and their guilt. And, the jury naturally repulsed by the imaginary behaviors described in Mr. Valle's internet communications, and fearful that they have revealed a deep-seated desire to actually harm women in real life, as the government implicitly argue, may have well accepted the government's argues that those fantasies indicated a propensity to commit violent crimes, and that he is a sick person and cannot be safely released into the community. So they played on the fears. It says, in my opinion, these conclusions are false. Right there, from Park Dietz. himself. I mean, who's going to argue against the guy who's interviewed Dahmer, who's interviewed Reagan's would-be assassin, Hinckley, I think it was, Andrea Yates, who drowned her kids. I mean, he's interviewed these people and a whole lot more famous people that we've seen, serial killers.
And Joel Rifkin, he's from New York too, if I remember correctly. But yeah, so I see all of this, and I understand why they didn't put him on the stand, because of they feared to put him on the stand for the sake of what might happen during cross-examination. It sounds like there was more good to putting him on the stand than there might have been to not have done that, based off of everything I've heard you read.
We had thought the same thing, but the defense disagreed with us. They know their opposition better than we do.
Sure.
And their opposition, was a pretty heavy team to get by. They made everything sound so convincing in court, but then again, it was all fear tactics. They put things to the most abhorrent of views when it came to this. If somebody was reading this and didn't know who the people behind this situation was, they would think, oh, a bunch of kids are writing this just to be dumb online, just to be stupid, and they just relied on that, and they played on it, and they feared that if Gil was put on the stand, they know their opposition, and they know they probably would have torn him apart on the stand, and then that would have been his chances right there, just gone. So they decided not to put him out. Back then we didn't understand why, but now after years go by, we understand why they made that decision. I mean, I'll admit, I was skeptical about the defense team for a long, long time. I mean, I just didn't think that enough was being done, but they managed to do it. They pulled around in the appeal. I mean, some of their team even joined Dark Fetish Network and made accounts on there, and within minutes they were being hit up by people wanting to chat, wanting to role play, within minutes. So I mean, it's a big following for crazy shit out there. I mean, it's just people have their dark sides, and how it comes to light and how other people accept it. It's already up to them and what's in their minds and what's in their hearts.
What was it like at home when he got out of prison?
Oh, we celebrated. We pun intended, we ate a lot. We drank a lot of liquor. I mean, it was like a big celebration. It's like justice is finally done. Common sense prevailed. I can understand the jury doing the conviction. I mean, they were scared into it. They were presented with a lot of what-if situations. Like, for example, the prosecutor was saying to the jury in his closing arguments, what if you were on an airplane and you heard two guys talking about hijacking a plane? And you did nothing? How would you feel? Well, you would be dead, number one. You wouldn't feel anything. Okay? Or another situation, how would you feel if you were in a restaurant and you hear the chef talking about poisoning the food and you did nothing and somebody died? How would you feel? So pretty much guilt tripping and playing on the fears and emotions of the jury instead of common sense. And a lot of the material that was viewed on the Dark Fetish Network, a lot of it even had my eyes rolling like, holy shit, like, really? But the fear tactics, all a bunch of fear tactics that the prosecution used to seal the conviction.
Are you still in contact with your brother Gil?
Absolutely, we do speak every now and then. I mean, it's not as often as I would like. He's got a decent job, he's keeping to himself. Me, I'm here in North Carolina, doing what I have to do to survive here and, take care of my wife, take care of myself, due to recent health problems. But we do talk every now and then. He's doing all right. He has a pet dog that he takes care of, a decent job with people that know him. It's not just a new hire type of guy, people that we've kind of grew up with in life. That gave him a chance after the verdict was overturned. And I mean, something like that is kind of hard to find a job with a kind of reputation like this. He even went on a couple of dating sites and they took his profile off immediately after finding out who he was and such. But he's doing all right. He's doing okay for himself. He's just keeping quiet, keeping out of the limelight. Occasionally he'll meet with people who will follow him, follow the case. He's met with people in the past. He also meets with a gentleman, Brian Whitney, who co-wrote Gil's book, Raw Deals, about his experiences being incarcerated. So by Wild Blue Press, so if you don't have a copy, get on Wild Blue Press, grab yourself a copy of this memoir, basically his experience in jail, talking with his defense, and a lot about the case.
What point does a thought, in your opinion, cross that threshold of becoming dangerous?
I always love a little decapitation with Mortal Kombat every now and then after a rough day, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna go actually do it. And the fine line between that would, for most people, be common sense. What do they have to lose? And how much of that they can lose? What are they gonna, how are they gonna put their families' lives through going through a whole bunch of craziness that they've caused by crossing a line from something that's so simple as a fantasy chat or playing a video game into actually committing a murder? I mean, it already depends on the person, the common sense, what they got going on around them, what their environment is like. I think that plays a key role in making people snap, honestly. A lot of people argue that he was very close to crossing that line, although he had no supplies to do so, no means to do so.
What you have just heard was the accounts of Joe Rodriquez, the brother of Gilberto Valle, and we had a lot of good information shared with us. We were really pleased to have him on. Every story has multiple sides, so please feel free to look into this more if you're interested. There's a plethora of videos out there on YouTube as well as other platforms. There's also a few documentaries that were made regarding the subject. For further research on Gilberto Valle, there's a book that he wrote called Raw Deal, which is basically a autobiographical memoir type style book about his time throughout this period, as well as his time in jail. It's a very interesting read, and if you'd like to get into the mind of Gilberto Valle, there's also a book that he wrote called A Gathering of Evil, which is more on the dark fantasy side of things. So my understanding is reader discretion is advised on that book, but it should be very interesting to kind of see what he was thinking and maybe kind of get into his mind a little bit if you're interested in him or this case. However, I would urge you to go ahead and follow us or subscribe to us if you haven't. Please feel free to comment. We would love to keep the conversation going about what your opinions on this case are. Was there a crime committed? Was Gilberto Valle guilty in your opinion, or is fantasy kind of under freedom of expression, if you will, or freedom of speech, so to speak? Please give us your opinions about that, and we'll be happy to get back to you. Other than that, all I can say is thank you to Joe and his family for allowing us to do this, and y'all have a great whatever you're doing right now, night, morning, evening, lunch, dinner, whatever it is that you're doing. Enjoy, take care of yourself, and we will see you again real soon.
You've been listening to PsychOpinion. If it's anything horror, we're talking about it.